listening to the IELTS podcast. Learn from tutors and ex-examiners who are masters of IELTS preparation. Your host, Ben Worthington.
Hello there, IELTS students. In this episode of IELTS Podcast, we're going to be talking to Renata Ponizil from Chile. I probably just butchered the pronunciation of that name. So, Renata, do you want to say it correctly, if that's okay?
Hello, everyone. Yes, my name is Renata, but my surname is Ponizil. But I got used to hear that Ponizil, so it's okay.
Okay, it wasn't a complete butchery as I expected, but okay, yeah, of course, because it's the Latin American no, for the Z, I imagine.
Well, actually, I'm currently living in Chile, but I'm from Serbia. From Europe,
right?
But yes, but my surname is actually from the Czech Republic, so quite confusing.
So nothing to do with Latin America, just your location. Okay, yes. I gotcha. Alrighty then. Okay, so Renata, do you want to just give us an introduction and tell us about yourself and like your experience and just to tell us about how you've got into teaching English and what you've been doing, if that's all right.
Yes, of course. So I've been teaching English for the last, 6-7 years, and I have experience teaching English at schools and also online. Currently, I'm teaching English online, and I'm working for a company located in Taiwan, and I'm teaching English to Chinese and Taiwanese people, and it's quite interesting. But on the other hand, I also have experience working with kids and adults in school, and that's also interesting, but on some totally different perspective. So I enjoy teaching very much, and currently I'm in Chile, and I'm looking for some new experience here.
Awesome. Wow, that's fantastic. Yeah, I love teaching Asian students as well. I mean, I do love teaching in general, but I remember when I started teaching with some Asian students and they worked so hard. I was just amazed, and the dedication, it just blew me away, really.
Yes, definitely. I also noticed that.
Yeah, it's a pleasure, and it makes it so much easier when the students are motivated and dedicated. And I remember when I used to teach children, and they used to be just like little monsters, and that was a completely different experience.
Yes.
But lovable monsters, of course.
Yes, that's right. And they are especially motivated because Chinese is so different from English, and they usually have difficulties with pronunciation. So they are very motivated. Yeah,
that's true. Can I just ask you, how do you help them with pronunciation? I know this wasn't on the list, but it's just I think it's an important topic because a lot of teachers, and myself included, struggle with to teach pronunciation.
Well, yes, that's difficult. For example, I don't know why, but usually they cannot pronounce the word internet. And I came across to hear internight. And when I tell them, letter by letter, N-E-T or N-E-T, they can say net, but altogether, it's always internight. So it's very difficult, but when I'm patient and when they are patient too, and when we pronounce letter by letter, word by word very slowly, they actually manage to say that in the end.
Okay, all right. So if you want to teach a certain word, you break it down letter by letter, syllable by syllable.
Yes. Syllable by syllable, and I always write them down because it's much easier for them to see and then to say.
Yeah. Okay. Excellent. Right then. And how do you help them with their vocabulary for the writing, and how do you improve it? Oh no, sorry. How important is the vocabulary for the writing? That's what I wanted to ask.
Okay, so vocabulary and writing are interrelated, and people actually use vocabulary to communicate their feelings, their ideas, their thoughts, and also if they want to put everything on a piece of paper, they have to write it down. So if they have a wide vocabulary, they are good at writing. And when I say vocabulary, I actually mean that having a good knowledge of synonymous and antonyms is actually the most crucial thing, not just learning single words. That's not good. So, for example, I hear so often, that's not what I meant, or I don't know how to explain it. Yes, this happens when people have limited vocabulary and great difficulties to express themselves. And let me think, for example...
Oh, go on, sorry.
Yes?
No, I was just going to jump on a point you said about synonyms and antonyms, but but carry on with what you were saying. Sorry.
Okay, yeah, I just remember the sentence. For example, people do a lot of things. Okay, this is very simple sentence, and everyone can say that, but it's much better if you say it like people perform a lot of tasks, and this is much better way to say the same sentence, which has the same meaning.
Absolutely, yeah. Can I just? I totally agree. I just interrupt you for a second, and you just reminded me. The other day, I was looking at a student's essay, and I can't remember the sentence exactly, but it was very similar to what you said. And it was something like, people who do bad things can end up in jail. And then I to sort of like to boost the score for a lexical resource, I was like, okay, to get to boost that score, to pick up extra points, what could we say instead of people? Something more specific. You say criminals, you know? What could we say instead of bad things? Where we could say crimes, we could say infringements or legal or illegal activities, you know? And it's just, I think, and you say bad things, what could you say, bad thing, evil or whatever, but it's just going through the essay, and you're writing and just looking for those opportunities for the topic specific vocabulary, you know, for the upgrades. Yeah, so yeah, I totally agree with you there.
Yes, and not only knowing words and synonyms and antonyms, but if students want to write good essays using rich vocabulary, I really think that they have to use dictionaries, they have to read books, they have to read newspapers, even watching movies is very good for them, because in that way they can pick up natural and correct language. And in that way they will be able to use words in a correct way. And for example, if they come across with new words, it's not good only to open the dictionary and try to remember words by heart. No, because let's say, for example, let me think. Yeah, the verb to get. If you open the dictionary, you can see that this verb has I think maybe 10, maybe even 15 different meanings. So just learning the first meaning by heart, it cannot help them, because they have to know how to use the word. And I think the best way is to make up their own sentences using new words. So that's what I think they can do.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I was just going to say another tool there is a thesaurus, you know.
Yes.
And I remember once I told my brother to get to use a thesaurus, and he thought I was referring to a kind of dinosaur. Yeah, but thesaurus for the students. If you're wondering, it's especially the online ones. They're fantastic. But you just type in a word, and then it'll give you 8 or 9, depending on the word, and it'll give you like 8 or 9 variations, or it's sort of like with different shades of meaning, but it's very, very similar. Yeah, so that's extremely useful, an extremely useful tool. And the thing what you mentioned before about synonyms and antonyms, that's extremely valuable. And I just want to go back to that because, and I've said this previously, but if you know the formulas, so you've got maybe a list of words, positive words, and you know the formula to make that into the negative or into the opposite. Just by knowing that formula, you've practically doubled your vocabulary, you know? Yeah. So if we're saying the word similar, and then we put on the prefix dis, so it's dissimilar, then, you know, we've doubled our vocabulary from 1 to 2. But not only that, we can say, let's say, simile, dissimile. I'm just trying to think of, let's see, de-inspect, de-cover. No, you can't say de-cover. Let's see. I'm just trying to think now. Like, but you know what I mean. If you say the D at the front, I can't think of any examples, but it's basically in a lot of the words, it's the opposite of what the original word was.
Yes, definitely.
All right. Okay, so let's go on to the next question. So, how important is grammar for writing? And how would you make it better? I will say my thoughts afterwards, but I'll let you speak. Sorry, it's your interview.
Okay. Okay, good. So, grammar and writing. When it comes to grammar, it's the most significant part for written communication, I think.
Absolutely,
and unlike written communication, oral communication is easier and not so strict because people can use gesticulation or facial expressions and they can understand each other. But when it comes to writing, without good knowledge of grammar, I think it's not possible to communicate feelings and ideas in a proper way. And I think that it's not good, and people would not understand written communication without good grammar. But when I say grammar, I mean all parts of grammar are very important. And there is a punctuation, which I really have to emphasize here, because I think that students usually forget about it at all, and they usually think it's not very important, but yes, it is very important. And I always remember the sentence which my professor told me when I was studying English, and she told us this example, let's eat, comma, grandma. And let's eat grandma without comma. So, shall we eat with grandma or shall we eat grandma? So, who said this? Wolves in the wood who wants to eat grandma, or kids who want to eat with grandma? So, it's only one comma and absolutely different meaning of the same sentence.
Absolutely, yeah.
Punctuation is very important, and I think that students really, really have to pay attention to that.
Yes, that's so true. Totally agree, and you're totally right as well. When we are speaking, we can cheat. Basically, it's not exactly cheating, but we do have a lot of tools to help us. It's so true. And for just going to the writing task for IELTS. When I'm correcting the essays and when I'm teaching it, I think I just bounce around the room like a crazy madman, shouting about how important grammar is, because if they can, like you said, if the grammar is faulty, if the grammar is not correct, then what is being said isn't being communicated. And this is a fatal error in IELTS, because if the examiner can't understand what's been written due to poor grammar, they cannot tell if they cannot give you points for task response because they don't understand what you've written. They cannot give you points for cohesion and coherence because they can't really understand it either. They don't know if it's coherent. It's definitely not coherent, So that's like 50% of the exam down the drain just because it hasn't been clearly communicated due to poor grammar. And another thing with the grammar, I find this a lot with, depending on the nationality of the students, but some nationalities, due to their own native language, have a preference for long, windy, wordy sentences. And the longer the sentence, the higher the probability of a grammar mistake. So it's not only are you going to increase the chances of losing points, but it's going to be you're going to increase the chances of it being completely incoherent. And this is
absolutely
and this is a dreadful mistake, because like we just said, if it's not understood, then there's no points. So I always tell my students, if they can just go for slightly shorter sentences, if the grammar's weak, if they go for slightly shorter sentences, then it's going to be much easier to be understood. But I mean, it depends as well what the target grade is. If they're going for a 6.5, perhaps a 7, then I mean, I guess the higher the band grade, the longer the sentence should be, until you get to a one-sentence essay. No, I'm just joking. Okay, so all right.
And actually, how I see it, I see that grammar is actually the foundation of communication, and the better the grammar, the clearer the message. And for example, we can have a look at a language like a very big highway, and the words could be vehicles on the road. So grammar is actually the road signs which tell the vehicles where to go and how to drive. And without those road signs, there will be a complete mess on the high road. So it's the same with language. Without grammar rules, it will be a complete mess, saying, pronouncing, making sentences.
Absolutely, that's a fantastic analogy as well, because like if there's a crash on the motorway, it's exactly the same with the communication, it's just like swap bam wallop, and boosh, there goes the communication, and there's, you know what I mean, it's not flowing, it's just jammed, and there's full on traffic congestion, full on no movement, no fluidity, no nothing. Okay.
That's right.
So what would you say, do you have anything else to say about grammar and maybe how a student can improve it?
Yes. Actually, I know that it might sound a bit boring, but just doing a lot of practice exercises can improve their grammar, because only if they practice like sentence by sentence and try to learn rule by rule. I know it's not fast and it's quite boring for them, but it's the only way they can do that, because of course I have to go back to my example. When a driver starts learning how to drive the car, he learned those road signs by heart, but actually, as long as he's not on the road, he cannot understand the signs very well. And it's the same in language, in grammar in this case. They have to practice, they have to use that, and then it will become natural for them and a routine.
Yeah, that's so true. And it's regarding the analogy of driving as well, it's I think it closely correlates to learning a language, because once you've learnt the rules and you start using them every day, just as when you're driving every day, you don't actually realize that you're obeying and following the rules because they're so internalized in you.
Exactly. Exactly.
And I think that's when you get to the not an extremely high level, but a very competent level in that language.
Yes.
Once you're completely unaware of all the rules that you're following.
Yes, so just open grammar books, start practicing sentence after sentence, rule after rule, and just don't give up, and it will become a routine, I think.
Absolutely. And I'll just mention to the students that there's there's like the Bible for English teachers. It's that Cambridge University Press book called In English Grammar in Use. And it explains the rule, and then it gives you about 10 or 20 questions to go through. And you can find an online PDF of that. It's everywhere, and you can just work through all the questions, check your answers. And also you can also just do like ESL, grammar, articles, online quiz. And
yes,
you just work through those. And I think to get to the level we were talking about, I'd strongly recommend just sort of like a commitment of an hour, 2 hours a day, bang, and just getting into the routine. Because like a whole afternoon of doing it and then not touching it again for 2 weeks isn't going to do much. But if you want to get to the level we're talking about, I'd recommend an hour a day or stuff. And another tip as well, if you can do this helped me absolutely loads. I got a big book of translations, and I translated from Spanish to English, from English to Spanish, and did maybe about 3 or 4 exercises every day, all summer. And and at the end, I wasn't very brown because I was in Spain at the time, and I wanted to get brown. But my grammar had improved incredibly, so I was much happier, and that was something I could keep actually. So anyway,
okay, great.
Anyway, so yeah, let's go to the next one, which was, what's the relationship between reading and writing?
Okay, so actually listening, speaking, reading, and writing are very connected, and altogether they have many similarities and also differences. And if we have a look at reading and writing, they are both written languages, while listening and speaking are both oral languages. So what connects reading and writing? Letters, words, syntax. So these things are something that keeps them together. And at the beginning, children usually first learn how to read, and later on how to write. And actually, they need a couple of years to develop both of these skills. And I think that full development of writing comes even later. So actually, what is reading? Reading is all about recognition and understanding, while writing is all about creation and production of a language. So, but they are very, very connected because they are connected by vocabulary, by meanings, by knowing how to access and employ and construct information. And I came across from my experience that students who possess high reading comprehension ability mainly have high quality of writing ability. And it is very important for students who, when read a text, to write the meaning and the main point of it. And in that way, they can improve their writing and to practice more. Yes, because in their own words, when they use their own words to say or write down what they read about, it's much better for them to develop writing and reading and even vocabulary.
Okay, fantastic. Yeah, fantastic point. And I'll just add, you said they've usually got an exceptional reading ability, the ones with high writing abilities. And for this to get to that exceptional reading ability, And there's a few different approaches. I think the most common and the easiest one, and definitely the most enjoyable one, is to read something that you actually enjoy. You know, I mean, fair enough, a lot of students want to write in an academic fashion, so they go about reading academic material. But the problem there is that sometimes the academic material can be a little bit boring, and they can switch off, and it takes a lot of willpower to push through reading academic material. Whereas if the student would have picked something that they really enjoy, or something that's a little bit more gripping and interesting, maybe a Harry Potter novel or Game of Thrones, or like something that's really difficult to put down and it's written in English or the target language, then it becomes a million times easier. I'm reading Game of Thrones at the moment, and I'm reading it in Spanish, and usually Spanish, I imagine this is the same for non-native English speakers when they read English, but it can be a bit of a challenge and take a lot of energy to read it. Whereas because I'm reading Game of Thrones and I'm getting really into it, it's becoming much, much easier and much more enjoyable. So yeah, that would be my recommendation there. And plus, of course, the grammar's practically perfect.
Yes, and they also can do rereading and proofreading of what they wrote. Because that's also a very good way of improving writing. And in this way they can pick up grammar, spelling, vocabulary, punctuation, writing, everything by reading, rereading, and...
Absolutely, yeah. This is what I tell my students on the sentence guide course, which is like a writing course specifically for IELTS. And what we do is I give them a task, they watch the videos, they send in their work, the written essays, I correct it, and then I tell them to correct those original essays that they sent, and then when they write their new essays, to check them for the same mistakes, check them for mistakes that they've made in previous essays, and then self-correct and proofread. And then this way, it's much easier to identify your mistakes and improve your essay without the examiner having to do it, which would save you points and obviously increase your score. Okay.
Yes.
So, moving on to the next point, how can a student write a better essay without a tutor?
Well, in order to write well, I think a student needs to read a lot. So this is very connected to the previous question, actually.
Yeah.
So, first of all, I think that students should start with newspapers and articles. But just reading is not enough. I always suggest that students should be critical. So that is very important. They have to think about the text they read. They have to try to find out why it is interesting or why it is not interesting for them. They have to pay attention to the techniques used in the text. They have to find out how they would write about the same topic in the same way, or how it would be different than the text they have just read, and to be critical and to see actually if they like the text that they read or not. And beside this, I think that it's also very good for them to read other students' essays. And again, not just to read, but also to be critical, to find out all these things that I have just mentioned. And the crucial is to pick up as many various topics as possible, and not to focus only to the subject of their interests. So
yeah, that's really good advice. Sorry, carry on. Have you finished?
Yes, I actually also want to emphasize audible books, which I think are
the what books?
Great.
Sorry?
Audible books, books where they have text and they have CD or I don't know.
Okay. Sorry, audiobooks. Sorry, yeah.
Yes.
Gotcha.
So they can play the text to listen to it, to write down what they heard, and then to check in the textbook if it's correct or not.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So this is also a great way of practicing.
Yeah.
And
that's a great tip.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll just tell the students one really good app for this is called Blinkist. Blinkist. And it's Blinkist app, and what you can do is just download a book. It's a summary of a book, so it's not as heavy, and they've usually got audio versions of that book, and the audio corresponds directly to the text in front of you. So yeah, it's such a decent way, such a really effective way, because you're hearing the word, you're seeing the word, you're engaging so many more senses. That's why I think it makes one of the most effective ways. And plus, like you said, if you do the transcription and write it out as you hear it, and then you can compare it with the actual official written text as well. So yeah, great tip there, Renata.
Yes, and also in order to write better essays, they really need to work on their spelling and vocabulary. That is, to focus on prefixes, suffixes, idioms, collocations, synonyms, antonyms, homonyms, false friends, and formal and informal words. They have to be aware of formal and informal language, because I saw a lot of written texts, and I could see mixture of informal and informal words in formal letter or informal letter, and that's such a confusion. So please be patient and pay attention to that, and just focus on it.
Two common errors I see with like a formal essay is like instead of saying I strongly agree with. For example, I strongly agree that pollution is a serious matter in the 20th century, or 21st century even. Then what I often see is I totally agree. And I totally agree sounds more like spoken English, especially American spoken English. And another one is like when a student wants to give an example, they may say, pollution is often caused by vehicles like cars, trucks, and motorbikes. Whereas it would have been much more formal if they say pollution is often caused by vehicles such as trucks, cars, trucks, and motorbikes. Just substituting the like for such as. I see that all the time. But yeah,
Yes, and I also wanted to add this, using linking words. This is very important. To write effectively and to avoid repeating the same expressions or single words. And using however, additionally, besides, in addition to, and many others is very, very good way for writing and for a reader to understand.
Absolutely. I was going to say I totally agree, and then I changed it for I strongly agree. It's spoken English now, so I totally agree. And another point I wanted to say was regarding the repetition. That's so true, and I find it myself. Like I was writing a letter today, and it was only an informal letter, just a handwritten one to a friend back in the UK, and I don't know. I kept repeating the word pretty, but like as in a pretty rough time, as a pretty decent thing to do, and I was like, oh man. But I think what's really common, and I think it's just for native speakers, non-native speakers, once that word's in the head, just to carry on using it a few more times. But and this is a good tip for the students, when they're reviewing their essay and looking for mistakes, if they can just go through it backwards as well from the conclusion and work up through it, and just look for any opportunities to replace words that have been repeated. This will help the lexical resource score significantly. And another point I wanted to just ask you about, Renata, was you said for a student to write a better essay, you said to read and to be aware of certain techniques that a writer could use. Can you give an example? Do any come to mind?
Well, for example, they can pay attention first about the topic, and then how, in which way is writer wrote it, and if what language he or she used in that text, what kind of expressions, what kind of sentences he used to make me to think about it maybe later or not. So
yeah, okay. I mean, a good technique that came to mind for a student writing an essay, and this is just a rather basic one, but it's just like when you're writing, and like we said before, we just touched on it before, and say pollution comes in all different guises, or comes in all different forms, especially in the city centre. Examples of these could include lorries, cars, motorcycle and motorcycles, but it's just a basic technique. But we just say 1, comma, 2, comma, and 3, full stop. You know, because sometimes quite often I read, it'll be like 1, comma, 2, comma, 3, comma, 4, full stop. And it just doesn't flow. It doesn't flow the same. So I always teach my students, okay, if you can put a list into your essay, put it in, because it's going to help you with the topic specific vocabulary. And when you do put in that list, do it in either 3s or 5s. Those are the best ways. Don't put it in 8s and 6s or 4s and 2s. Just 3s and 5s, and that's the most eloquent way of doing it. All right. So do you have anything else you want to say to the students before we finish up? Because I think we're coming towards the end of the interview.
Well, I can just suggest some sources that they can use, actually, which I used to use with my students. Excellent.
Yes, please do.
Yes. So when it comes to dictionaries, I personally like Macmillan Dictionary online version, because
sorry, go on.
Okay. So I really like it, because there are descriptions of words, there are examples, there are synonyms, antonyms, and there are all meanings of one word. And for example, if I find a word which is a noun, I can also see the verb, the adjective, and the other parts. And so I really like Macmillan, but I also like Oxford and Merriam-Webster.
Okay.
So they are great, and they are also dictionaries and thesaurus. And when it comes...
I was surprised when you said Macmillan, because personally, I mean, I'm only talking personally, but I prefer the Oxford one or the Cambridge one, but I think it just comes down to personal preference. And another, not the Macmillan one, the Webster one, that really grinds me, that really bugs me, because sometimes they don't include English or British words, or they mark it as incorrect, and I'm like, it's not incorrect, I've used it all my life. But anyway, when
I write down something which is, for example, British English, I always have the example in American English, so I usually see the differences.
Okay, yeah. I mean, but with Merriam-Webster, I've put in the words a few times, and it's given me the American interpretation, and it's missed the British one, you know.
Okay.
But I mean,
Yes,
and I think
see.
the Cambridge or the Oxford one will go into a little bit more detail, and occasionally it'll put sort of like used in northern England or common in southern England.
That's right.
You know.
That's right. Absolutely.
And me being the patriotic, God save the Queen Englishman that I am.
Yes.
I'm just joking, but yeah, it's just personal preference, isn't it?
Yes.
The other thing I was going to say, the dictionary that I really do love, and this is, I think, especially useful if you're looking at the two different languages and you're not just totally immersed in the English language. If you're looking at two of them, is Lingui, Lynguee. I find that amazing, and it's got like the word, but it gives you the word in 10 different contexts, and then the same word in 10 different contexts, but the same text, but translated in another language, you know? So you can find very accurately the word that you want to use in the other language. So that's what I found is pretty useful as well.
Mm-hmm. Okay, good. Yeah, and also English vocabulary news, Cambridge.
Oh yeah, of course.
That's really great because you can really improve your vocabulary by using this book. Mm-hmm. And also when it comes to grammar, English grammar in use, and English idioms in use and collocation in use. So all of these Cambridge books are really great for practicing.
Yeah, and they've got a good collection of apps actually as well for the to learn all this vocabulary and the collocations. They're not too bad, actually. They're not too bad. And another tool I'd strongly suggest, especially for students who might be moving around a lot, who may be traveling from country to country or carrying a lot of physical books, would be the Kindle. I find that so good for boosting my vocabulary, you know, and like 2 taps, I've got the definition of the word, and if I go on holiday, I can take about 200 books with me, you know, it's super valuable.
Yes, it's amazing, really. Yeah, agree.
Okay, so I think that's everything, isn't it, Renata?
Okay.
Yeah. Okay.
Yes.
Well, what I'll do is I'll put a link. So on the blog post, I'll put a contact link and the details there. If you want to get in contact with Renata and have a class with her, you can get the details from this blog post. And tell me. Yeah. So I think that's everything. And yes, students, if you've got any questions, just email me, or you can email Renata. She would be happy to respond.
Of course, yes. Looking forward to it.
Yeah, well, you can send me an email, students, at Ben at IELTSPodcast.com. Or jump onto the Facebook page, and looking forward to hearing from you. So I guess that's everything. And if you are struggling with IELTS, yes, send me the email and just keep persevering, keep pushing on, because eventually you'll get there.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
For listening to IELTSPodcast.com.